The first example here is push authentication and cached Windows credentials. The logon prompt will request a one-time password, and you can trigger that by pressing enter. There will be a push request on the user's device. The user will have to approve or deny that request given some contextual information. And access is granted. Our second example is manual input of the one-time password, still with cached Windows credentials. So this would also be the behavior if you have a hardware-based authenticator. So I tap the specific authenticator, it generates a one-time password, and then I input that, so 959651, and press enter. Now a third approach, the more secure approach, is one-time password, in this case still with push, but then to also require Windows credentials. So we press enter to trigger push, approve the authentication request, that was indeed me, and we are now prompted, it says enter your Windows password. So we're now prompted for the Windows password, we provide that as well, and press enter. Now there are a few things you can do to either, on one hand, improve usability, user friendliness, on the other hand, improve security. So in my case, I use push authentication, and then I could also generate manually one-time passwords simply by tapping on the authenticator like so. What you could do is you could require a numerical PIN code like such. So in this case, a 4-digit PIN code that will generate the one-time password as well. Lastly, you could substitute that PIN code for biometric authentication, either fingerprint or Face ID. And this also highlights that we can have different types of authenticators. So most of the authenticators I have, they will be event-based. This last authenticator, you see the counter there, is going to be a time-based authenticator. So that expires and will generate a new dynamic password in a few seconds here. There you go. Client-side configuration. The first thing to note is that typically the customer will use group policy and Active Directory to set these various parameters. In the offline tab, we deal with scenarios where the user has poor connectivity or is actually offline, for example, traveling on an airplane. So in these cases, we can support multi-factor authentication anyhow by allowing a number of stored dynamic passwords to be used. The user can then manually replenish that store of dynamic passwords, or it will happen automatically at the next successful authentication event involving the authentication server. I'm doing an authentication test here just to show that that feature is available as well. Now the policy tab is going to be our main configuration view, controlling features available and look and feel. First thing here is the emergency password, really a last resort, so the user has no access to a functioning authenticator, perhaps. Then we can allow the use of a fixed one-time use password. Other settings involves Windows password caching. I used that in two of the examples for the authentication event. And then various settings pertaining to RDP, Windows Explorer, and so on and so forth. We can then select the applicability of who will be required to use multi-factor. So that could be based on all users, some users, and we can exclude or include. We have settings relating to credential tiles. There could be other third-party credential tiles as well involved. Then the communication tabs is where you would point to, in this case, the SAS cloud service. It could also be an on-premise service, and we could have additional servers defined for high availability and resilience. There's a client to server key here for authentication. And then we have ways of dealing with how the username is inputted. For example, some users may input the UPN, which is sort of a email syntax format, or the user might input net bias style. So we can deal with that as well. So we apply that setting. That tells me everything is okay with the primary and secondary server. Some configurations, certainly enterprise deployments, will have you go through a proxy, and the policies will allow you to deal with that as well. So next tab is appearance. You can customize to some extent the look and feel. And lastly we have log level. Assuming we're happy with the configuration, we click apply, OK, and then OK again. Another thing you can do if you want to focus on usability and user friendliness is you can change the language, you can change the wording, and of course you can actually change the language. You can localize it so that the end user experience is somewhat more enhanced. Now to do this, you actually need to edit a few lines in our language file. Typically you would copy this and save a backup and then edit a new one. And I'm gonna use just a simple example. It's gonna be line 122, which is the typical password prompt or authentication prompt. We'll just take and replace that with hey, enter your OTP. So short and simple, most users will understand that. I'll delete the current lines, we'll replace that. Okay, we're good. Save that and let's see this in action. It now says, hey, enter your OTP. Server side in SafeNet Authentication Service, there's going to be a few settings to have a look at as well. The first one is on our user, just to prove the fact that we have a emergency password now set. We view the user, and about in the middle here is the emergency with a fixed complex password, and that's a use once password. Token policies will control the deployed MobilePASS authenticator in this case, but also allow you to configure the range of authenticators supported by SafeNet Authentication Service. So OAuth would be generic, standard based, and you have gold physical tokens, e-token physical tokens. MobilePASS is what we're concerned about in this case. So we have the quick mode or quick log and the challenge response mode, the length of the generated password, and then whether the authenticator is time-based or event-based. And in my case, I had one time-based and the other ones were event-based. We can also control whether to require a PIN code, and that PIN code could be in the app, so client side or server side, in which case it could be appended to the generated password. The last setting is with regards to push authentication. So we see that we can control this on a per platform basis, provided of course that the platform will support this. So Android, iOS, Windows, desktop are all supported. Make sure those are enabled and we apply the settings. That's it.